Welcome to Henry's Library. I'm your host, Jackie Douge. Grown-ups, before we get started with today's story, we have a brief announcement from our sponsors, and then we'll be right back to start today's story. Hey grown-ups, this episode of Henry's Library is brought to you by Mel Science. One of the goals of Henry's Library is to introduce kids to STEM topics in a fun, engaging way. That's what Mel Science offers to kids, a fun way to learn real science. Kids from ages 5 and up can learn about chemistry, physics, medicine, and other STEM topics. Mel Science is a science subscription for kids with hands-on projects, an interactive mobile app, and live classes with professional teachers. To celebrate the launch of Henry's Library, over the next month, you can receive 60% off your first kit order when you use promo code WHATISBLACK60. That's WHATISBLACK and the number 60. Visit mailscience.com to learn more, sign up for their newsletter, and get started with your subscription today. Let's get started with today's adventure, the Feather Bookmark. Henry loved to read books. He loved books because his grandmother loved books. They would visit the library every week together to find new books to help Henry answer all his questions. But there was one visit that would be different from all the other visits to the library. As they walked into the library, Henry told his grandmother about his day in school. "We learned about planets and stars. I want to investigate to learn more about how we can see the planets and the stars." "Hello, Henry," Mrs. Simon, the children's librarian, said. "How can I help you today?" "He's investigating," Grandma said. "Yes, I'm investigating how I can see planets and stars," Henry said. "I'll be right back. I think I have just the books for you," Mrs. Simon said. Henry and his grandma looked through the library bookshelves while waiting for Mrs. Simon to return. "I think you'll like these two books, Bright Sky, Starry City, and Hidden Figures," Mrs. Simon said. "Thank you. There's one more thing that I have for you." "What is it?" Henry asked excitedly. "This is a kit for you to make a constellation view and help you see the stars," Mrs. Simon said. "Oh yeah, I learned all about constellations in school. They are a group of stars that form different shapes." Henry took the kit, which was a bag with a list of supplies he would need to make his constellation viewer. "I can't wait to make this with Dad." Henry and Grandma waved goodbye to Mrs. Simon. "Before we read them, I have a surprise for you," Grandma said. She pulled out a small silver box from her jacket pocket. "I think you're old enough now," Grandma said. She opened the box, and inside was a blue feather. She carefully took it out and handed it to Henry. Henry looked at the feather, excited to learn more about it. "This feather has been in our family for generations," Grandma said. "It's very special." "What does it do?" Henry asked. "Let me show you," Grandma said as she took the feather from Henry's hand. She opened one of the books. "Hold my hand," Grandma said. She was almost yelling because of the sound of the wind blowing. "Grandma, what?" Henry wasn't able to finish his question. Suddenly they were gone. Where did they go? Grandma and Henry had traveled into the book. Grandma then waved the feather again, and they were back home. "The stars were so beautiful," Henry said. "I want my own telescope so that I can see the stars. I think that's something that Dad and I could do together, just like the characters in the book." "Did you forget about the kit that Mrs. Simon gave you?" Grandma asked. "Oh, yeah," Henry said. "Can we travel into the next book?" Grandma tapped the other book, and they traveled in and out. "That was so amazing! I didn't know about Katherine Johnson, Christine Darden, Dorothy Vaughan, and Mary Jackson. I didn't know they were important to help the astronauts go into space. And they were so nice. I told Dr. Darden that my dad's an engineer. She told me that she was a mechanical engineer." "They were amazing," Grandma said. "They're just like you too. They loved to learn and investigate questions that they had." Henry smiled, thinking that he could be like them one day. Maybe he could make history and travel to other planets. Then he'd see stars all the time. He also still couldn't believe that he traveled into 2 books. "Is magic real?" he asked. "Yes, it is," Grandma said. "Didn't you know that there's magic in books?" Henry stood there thinking about his grandma's question. "There is magic in books." "I'm giving this to you," Grandma said, handing Henry the silver box with the feather inside. Later that night, Henry told his parents about the adventure he and Grandma had earlier that afternoon and the constellation viewer kit that Mrs. Simon had given him. Grandma also had some news to share. "Simone, my sister, needs me to stay with her for a few months," she said. "You're leaving us?" Henry asked sadly. "Only for a little while, until my sister's feeling better," Grandma said. "She needs my help while she's recovering from her surgery." "Okay, that's important," Henry said. "I want Grandaunt Simone to feel better and have someone with her." "Thank you for understanding," Grandma said. "But you won't have time to miss me. I spoke with your mom and dad, and they've promised me that we can FaceTime every night so that you can tell me all about the wonderful adventures that you'll have with that special gift I gave you." She winked and smiled at him. Henry stood up from the table and ran over to give his grandma a big hug and kiss. "I promise that I'll call you every night," Henry said. Later that night, as Henry lay in bed with his dog Bear next to him, he told him all about his plans to work with his dad on making the constellation viewer. Then he took one of the books that he borrowed from the library and the Feather Bookmark from the silver box that he had kept on the nightstand next to his bed. "You have to see this," he said. He touched the feather to the book and was surprised to hear what happened next. "Are we going on an adventure?" Bear asked. "You can talk," Henry said quickly because the wind started up. He grabbed one of Bear's paws. "Hold on." Henry and Bear left for their new adventure. The end. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Henry's Library. We hope you and your family enjoyed this story and learned something new, and maybe an idea or two that you want to investigate and learn about by reading books. Join us next week for another adventure with Henry, Curry, Bear, and Birdie. Parents, please rate, review, subscribe, and share the podcast. And we'd love to hear what your kids are learning and like about the show. You can send us a message via email to hi@whatisblack.co. You can also go to our website, whatisblack.co/Henry's Library Podcast, to see the books mentioned in this episode and links to fun activities. We encourage you to read the books from the episode together as a family. Books mentioned in this episode can be found at your local library or bookstore. We love all bookstores and hope that you consider checking out your local independent bookstores to support them.